I think one of the most special things that we have that we've been gifted, that our gift is our uniqueness. And that uniqueness comes from our authenticity, right? So there's only one Tim Sae Koos in the world, and that's what makes you so special. And there's one of everybody. And so walking this path is really about coming back to the core and understanding oneself very, very deeply and clearly, and asking, do you have that conviction to really step into your authentic power, or are you too afraid of your greatness?
Welcome to The Awakened Leader, transformative stories with plant medicine by One Heart. In each episode, we'll speak face-to-face with successful, heart-centered leaders and conscious creators. We'll go deep into how their lives have been transformed from their work with sacred psychedelic plant medicines within our unique container. You'll hear stories from CEOs, changemakers, and creatives about their experience, and then learn how those moments have propelled them to elevate their life and the lives of those around them. Each guest has completed One Heart's 8-week Human Accelerator for Life Elevation program. This container brings together 40 amazing heart-centered leaders for an epic 1-week transformational journey in Costa Rica, plus 7 weeks of virtual preparation and integration before and after. Our intention with this podcast is to plant a seed within your heart that we all are powerful, conscious creators, capable of manifesting our most aligned lives filled with joy, fulfillment, and love. Our mission is to elevate the life, work, and community of heart-centered leaders by reminding them of our truth that I am you, you are me, we are one. All right, everybody. So, real talk. Tiffany's episode is a special one. Not only have I known Tiffany as a dear friend before One Heart and witnessed her powerful transformation, Tiffany is very unique because she's had just about 4 years to integrate her ayahuasca experience with One Heart. For context, only Gerard Adams from our first episode has had this length of integration. And this is important to note because we say that the true and sustained transformation comes from the integration period. Tiffany embodies a life of depth, service, and surrender as she consciously left the Silicon Valley success recipe for being of service through her nonprofit organization, Soul Seeded. As I mentioned at the start of the show, she's on a path of alignment and enlightenment. We, and really Tiffany, cover deep, meaningful, and empowering wisdom from start to finish in this episode. Our producer even called this his favorite episode to date, comparing it to a Dharma talk. Throughout the episode, some of my favorite talking points with Tiffany are why she chose to step away as a successful VP in a publicly listed company, into a steward in her nonprofit organization, her most powerful takeaways from her ayahuasca ceremonies, and how they reminded her of her Dharma path, how she redefines success as a recovering Type A entrepreneur, advice she gives to those who feel the call to walk a non-conformist path of service, and so much more. This is an episode of The Awakened Leader you don't want to miss, as we get to see an embodiment of a powerful, integrated, devoted person 4 years after working with these sacred medicines. So strap into this heart-expansive conversation with Tiffany Liu. Today, I am joined by my dear friend, Tiffany Liu. She actually comes from our journey too in New Year's of 2019. Tiffany is a transformation consultant and the founder of Soul Seeded Journey, a 501c3 youth development not-for-profit delivering holistic, evidence-based, whole child wellness programs to help resilient youth in underserved communities develop the skills, capabilities, and strategies to rise up and soar. As an immigrant and suicide attempt survivor in her teens, Tiffany's not-for-profit work is rooted in her commitment to social equity and ensuring all young people have access to opportunities that unlocks their passion, power, and potential. She has been recognized as an executive specializing in large-scale cross-functional and cross-sector collaboration and coordination, engagement and planning, org change management, strategic advisory, and leadership development. Some of Tiffany's transformation work includes emerging market innovation at LegalZoom, global workforce restructuring, worldwide portfolio management, and cultural turnaround at HP Enterprise. As an entrepreneur, she's also co-founded an edtech startup funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, later acquired by Inside Track. Overall, I say she is an amazing badass, and I'm so excited to connect with her and converse with her around her One Heart experience, her work with the medicine, what's transmitted since the last 4 years in her transformation. So thank you, Tiffany, for joining on. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Thanks for having me, Tim. It's exciting to be here.
So I've had the pleasure of getting to know you sort of before and after your One Heart experience back in 2019 in our San Francisco days. I would say that what I see of you now is on this path of alignment and enlightenment. And I'm sure a lot has had to unravel for you, maybe shed to get here. But who were you before you were on this path of alignment and enlightenment? If you can give us just an overview of who this Tiffany was before this path.
That's a good question. It's been a long time since I visited old Tiffany. Well, you mentioned, I think from a work perspective, I was always been an entrepreneur at heart. I had led transformation for large companies. I think on a personal level, though, I was somebody who was always, unbeknownst to me then, hindsight's always clear, but I was always somebody who was working for a validation. I think it was really important for me to receive the validation that I needed to know that I was worthy and that I was good enough. So I would like to describe that who I was then was always living in this hyperactivity of constantly feeling that empty void within. There was a story I recently had shared that came up was, I remember in my early 30s, I had sat down in my office and I have this 10-year plan, and I would sit there and I said, okay, did I check it off? And in my 30s, I looked at the thing and I said, oh my gosh, I'm ahead of schedule. Like I had checked off every single thing. But the one thing that I wasn't able to check off was this feeling that I had, which is not good enough. So you can kind of get a sense that a lot of what I was doing, a lot of the successes I had of trying to find wealth and position and influence and achievements and validations were all so much to make sure that I was feeling the little kid who wasn't sure, that she really fit into this big, big world.
Yeah, beautiful. I relate with you in that I believe we're both first generation Taiwanese American, and, having immigrant parents coming into the States, giving us the opportunity we have. At least for my own story, I've realized there was a lack of self-worth that I grew up and pursued, like you, the entrepreneurial path to fill that void. Maybe I didn't have the right words or labels to identify that. But looking back, I can say very much like resonate with you in that feeling of lack or that gap and hole that was very elusive, because at the end of the day, as we realize, a lot of that really has to come from within.
Right. We're getting deep really fast, right? This is like
that's the point. That's the point. So okay, so you're this high performing, driven person. I mean, I remember seeing a glimpse of that before we entered into our first One Heart journey together, New Year's of 2019. And you were living in a nice home. You had just thought about transitioning out of the corporate world. But I heard from my sister who introduced us that you were just a badass, high performer, like the super reliable, get shit done person. And what at that moment there was, I started getting to know you and we started talking about plant medicine. What ultimately kind of moved you to a place or feel called to work with plant medicine and then ultimately to join a One Heart journey? Because I know you had worked with medicine a little bit prior and then decided to join One Heart. What led into those decisions, and I believe a very integral part of your life?
So on my journey, one truth that I discovered is that it turns out that when we're desperate, we discover. And that was where I was. At the fall of 2018, I had spoken to your sister, and I was at a point where I knew I had to take a break. I left. I had experienced my first plant medicine retreat. So I had known by that time, the profound insights and the powerful healings it can bring. Um, I wanted to dig deeper, though. It was important for me to get even deeper understanding of, who am I to be and what am I to do? So that was sort of the initial calling into one heart. The desperation, while it went away, in terms of not knowing from a state of confusion and anxiety, had shifted into a desperation of wanting to really love my pain, wanting to love and understand from a place of worthiness. So interesting that there was desperation helped me to discover, but the motivation behind both was different by the time that I started with One Heart. Yeah.
Super powerful. And would you say those were the intentions that you went into your ceremonies, or were they a little bit different in what you went in with, if you could recall, 4 years ago?
No, it was. My intention 4 years ago, by the time I had stepped into One Heart, I knew that I had already resolved, fortunately, my core wound. I knew exactly, why I was here, what my purpose was. I didn't need to know how I was going to show up. So my intention going in is, who am I to be? What am I to do? And how am I to serve?
And from that, what emerged from your ceremonies? Feel free to share any core takeaways, these big reminders, or even visions that you may have seen or received. What were some of the major breakthroughs or realizations as you went into these ceremonies with that intention?
Oh, there was a lot. I feel like it's always so hard to describe the experience of a plant medicine journey because it doesn't always quite, like language or words sort of falls short. I might digress here, but someone was asking recently, like, how do you describe a plant medicine journey? I said, it sort of feels like you're you're embarking on this, like wild terrain, right? Like on an episode of like Alone, where the unknown is like this big secret, and nature holds all of the secret, and it's hidden, it's locked away, and where discovery and learning is the only way to unlock and reveal those secrets that help us shift from survival to thriving. So it's hard to describe those because when I first went into my ceremony, I'm sure with everyone else who had that is, you're excited, you're full of hope, but you're also very nervous. I think that the research literature has shown that for us, there's like three factors that sends all of us universally into like a stress ball, which is, uncertainty, loss of control, and ambiguity. And I think
Probably the
is
three
that
biggest fears for any, probably the three biggest fears for any entrepreneurs.
yeah. And the plant medicine ceremony takes all three of them together in one sitting. So, uh, so that was kind of my first experience, if I was to describe what it was. But what I would say is the beauty is actually experiencing through that as a child without those emotions. What I had come to understand from my ceremony is a greater and deeper trust within myself. It sort of has, while I knew my purpose, I was shown that it had eliminated any doubt that I had about what am I to do in this world. It made my sole purpose and my contract even clearer. it has fueled that conviction to devote my life to removing these barriers that prevent everyone, right? Not just the privileged or the wealthy, from experiencing higher consciousness and unlocking their potential. I recall this one vivid image of this beautiful goddess who was sort of hovering above the world. And as she opened up her arms and she's speaking, all these hearts lit up on the west. And it was such a beautiful imagery that has really stuck with me. And beautiful thing with plant medicine also is that while you have images, you don't always understand the meaning of them until things continue to unfold. They're sort of like these little fractals. I'm excited to share that, after finally 3 years, all of those pieces has finally integrated. I know who the goddess is, my purpose. So that's what I am doing today now, which is, forgoing all the um, attractive, high salaried, high tech positions to be the treasure hunter of the kids. So founded this nonprofit charity, as you mentioned earlier, to really bring a lot of amazing things like what One Heart is doing, wellness services, high quality well-being education, really across the street for those who really need them but can't afford it.
Wow, so much to unpack here. Well, I first wanted to acknowledge that it sounds like, and it's very beautiful that you received that, you said like contract or even that conviction, and all doubts melted away for your purpose. And I would say you're in a very unique position because your first journey with us was almost 4 years ago, and you've had these last 3-4 years to really, quote, what we call integrate our experience. And so can we jump in a little bit more into and have you share a little bit more about what's that, integration phase look like for you in terms of the path that you've opened up for yourself, for example, with Soul Seeded Journey?
Yeah. By the way, doubt never goes away. I think it goes away for a period of time, stepping out of a ceremony, because you do have that clarity. But, in this Saha world, with lots of squirrels, lots and lots of squirrels, it's hard not to, remain in that state without some practice. So it's not to
Like
say
it'll
that
creep
this
in.
past
It'll
couple
creep in. Yeah.
Oh, all the time. Yeah. So integration has really been a key for me. I have not actually sat with the medicine since, so it has been quite some time. But I have found that medicine for me has been a catalyst in opening up these profound truths, inner truth and wisdom. And there are additional modalities that are very accessible on an ongoing basis to help us keep us centered and grounded with where we are. I don't think they're any different from what I feel people are already doing today, which is, meditation, yoga, walking. My favorite is actually just sitting. Doesn't sound exciting, but it actually is. I spend a lot of time actually sitting in solitude, really reflecting and contemplating. And with that, I would say that the single most important practice that I have is Dharma. I have been studying Dharma. My families are all disciples of Master Chen Yan, who's the founder of Tzu Chi Foundation. She's one of Time's 100 most influential spiritual leaders. And I've had the blessing and the fortune to be studying and observing her and the amazing work that she's been doing. Dharma has been one of those things that helped me stay grounded and centered in universal truths so that, my heart doesn't get, what I like to say, contaminated. And so I have a nice container and shield around that.
Yeah, I think you bring up some fascinating points, which I just want to echo here, which is, the medicine might not be for everybody.
And that's okay. And those who do feel called, amazing. And I always say that once you go on this rapid rocket cosmic journey, grounding practices are going to be integral in remembering. And you're touching upon like meditation, yoga, breath work. You're saying sitting and just contemplation as grounding practices to remember what we received from these potent ceremonies and experiences.
And one thing I would also add is, when I think about everything in energy, right? There's 24 hours a day. We spend so much of our time really working, attending to really life in general, family, personal. I almost started to think about how much time do we actually invest in doing the things that nurture us humanistically? Like when we think about kindness as an example, right? Kindness is such a powerful medicine of its own because without kindness, we can't begin to even self-advocate. We can't, without kindness, I can't empathize with your story or even begin to know what injustice might surround us. And without kindness, I wouldn't have the power or the conviction to step up and rise up to become the change that I know needs to be. So in context of something so simple like kindness, the question becomes how much time and energy do we invest in nurturing these things? And in my experience, through the ceremony at One Heart has helped me understand that, the universal currency to life is love. So in the
I love
24
that.
hours a day, I would always say is, how much time do we that? So that's really been a fundamental shift in my life, which is I now measure my life by every second of my day is how much time am I giving and sowing love?
And being love as I try to ask myself that, right? Like how much
Yeah,
my day and my presence and my awareness am I in a state of being love that will lead to the actions of rooted in love.
absolutely. Yeah.
So one thing I truly admire about you is, and similar to me, is after playing the corporate, let's say tech game, entrepreneur, startup, exit game, the easy answer is to say, let's just run it back and do it again because we figured out a formula to repeat the playbook. And yet, and what I see a lot in myself with you is making a different choice. And I would maybe call it the path of service. And after witnessing your experience through One Heart and for the last 3-4 years, I've seen your devotion to this path of service through Soul Seated Journey. And first, I just want to ask, like, why? Why did you move down that path of service? Because I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs hearing this or leaders might be hearing this being like, it takes a lot of courage, I'm sure. But why? Why would you move down that path?
I feel the question we have to ask ourselves is do we really want for this world? Like, do we really want to elevate others? And if so, then we have to go and do the things that is the hardest. And the way I see it is the best decision to invest in our future is to invest in our kids now. The majority of the kids are also the minorities. There is no money to be made in kids because they have no money. And then you take this to low income and distressed community, and that's prevalent all across the world. So it comes back to compassion. If we say that we are compassionate, that requires that we flow love away from ourselves onto others. And if we want flow, like all this conversation about, flow state, flow performance, you and I have discussed this before. What is flow? Other than following love over will. That formula is very simple. It requires no will. So I like to think about what would a world be like if there were no eyes? If we completely eliminated the word I. When I sat in the ceremony, I think what's really beautiful is that it really does suspend the mind. It suspends the ego and it allows our heart to just speak for itself. And in that moment, what I realize is the I is not there. It's not there to complicate it. It's not analyzing. It's not judging. It's not criticizing. It's not doubting, right? And all of this thinking is what's inhibiting flow. If we start to remove the I from the equation, things become a lot clearer. Life becomes a lot simpler. And we realize all we want to do, all our heart wants to do, is to be love, as you said, and to love others. So that equation, why I'm doing this, becomes very simple because it's not about the money. I trust that there is a way to do good and do well, that we will be taken care of when we first learn how to give to others. And we will receive bountiful in return. And that abundance will flow back to us.
Pure music to my ears. It's the same message I've been sharing these last couple years after my own journey of service and devotion to that. I call it devotion to selfless service, or surrendering to selfless service, and trusting that with that deep intention of love and compassion that you're alluding to and mentioning, the abundance that maybe we're so used to manifesting and capturing and controlling gets to all be let go, and cultivate that deeper trust with a greater power and know that it's coming. And I can say it has been for me. And I would love to just hear from you as you've continually poured your energy and heart into Soul Seated Journey. What's been some of that abundance that comes back to you in all facets? In all facets of emotional, spiritual, mental, physical, and financial, if anything around that.
Well, financial is tough. There's one thing I learned that's before is startups are hard, but then when you add not for profit into the equation, well, then you have to be a masochist to put those two things together. Because what I learned also very quickly is, because there's a lot of I's, not enough we's. When you go into nonprofit, when people are donating, the people who actually have the money are not in the low income communities. There's limitations a lot in different places. So we'll leave the financial on the side for now. But fortunately, that is not the key to true wealth. I think wealth, as we know, is a lot to do with joy, peace, and harmony. And that path is central to our experience of being alive and truly living well. And I think it's time we redefine what well means. That well has nothing to do with, money and power and influence and achievement. I was a great example. I had all of those things that society would say, oh, she's doing well, she's doing great. And yet that didn't stop me from being a statistic for suicide attempt all the way up into my 20s, right? They say that, oh, if you have gainful employment, if you graduated from a good university, if you have a great job, right? These things are living well. That is absolutely not the case. I think we understand that, what this journey has brought me, and, then I'll talk also about the kids, is for me, it's really helped me ascertain the definition of success by my own standards of those things that
And what
I
is that?
unfortunately cannot.
And what is that now?
I think it's being able to manifest my essence out here at the personality level on a consistent basis, and that's love. And I feel that sounds very simple, and that is supposed to be simple. My life is not very complicated. I wake up every day and I think about, how can I give love? How can I make someone's life better through Soul Seated? Whether it's activating our community of partners, or for the people in Bayview Hunters Point, and now, in Brooklyn, New York. My definition of success has really changed in Soul Seated. As a result, my lifestyle has changed completely. And I would also say that, the joy is seeing hope. Hope is so powerful. When there is love, there is hope. And where there is hope, we start to emanate this pool of contentment and gratitude, right? You're no longer lacking. And so comes from this hope is also this, I would say, this oasis of serenity. And that's what it's brought me. These are the things that I no longer have to fight for. I'm not in this hyperactivity of being driven by, not enough and needing more. Like there's none of that. I can just like, I'm good. I'm okay. Right?
That peace feels amazing, as I can share from my own experience. And I'm curious, just so that the audience and listeners can hear a little bit more about Soul Seated. What are you guys doing there? And one story that kind of comes up that really encompasses this peace, this fulfillment, this path of service that you've really devoted yourself to, that you refer back to as like, yes, this is why I'm doing that.
Yeah. Wow. So Soul Seated is unique in that, our organization's all about bringing together what I call disparate pieces and removing barriers and silos. From a programmatic perspective, we take evidence-based research together with expert-led communication on well-being and wellness, and then we bring it together to address the whole child. So all these things you mentioned earlier, physical, nutritional, spiritual, right? We bring it all together and we orchestrate a very intentional journey to help our kids get from point A to point B. And we do so by going into the community to really understand, okay, what are their needs? Where are the gaps? Where are the struggles the kids are experiencing? And then we design something custom that is fit for purpose in that community. But instead of saying, hey, we can do it all, we bring all the community of what I call treasure hunters of kids, right? Whether you're in this profession, in this sector, so we're not issue specific, we're not sector specific, we're not, field specific. We just bring people who care about the youth to come together, and we orchestrate this beautiful journey. So the flute can be the flute, the oboe can be the oboe, but together we have this beautiful symphony of music that can comfort the kids in this journey. We have seen powerful transformations just in the last 2 years. Because we focus on social emotional learning, what we're starting to see is there's so many stories, but one that comes to mind is this. We have a child. I say child, it should kill me. She's now 18. When we met her, she was depressed, filled with anxiety. She was at home 24/7. She lives in a family of 8 in a 2-bedroom place in the projects. She's also we learned through the process, she's a victim of sexual abuse. Parents are unfortunately involved in drugs. And so there's a lot of trauma there. She went from being attempted suicide to this year, she has let her hair down. She drew this beautiful picture of where she was when she before. And this one previous picture, it's her hair covered. She used to hide herself with her hair in the mask. At the very last day of our program in August, she had her hair out like Diana Ross. Okay. She has a boyfriend now. And in her picture now, in the after drawing, her hair is down. And on top of that, which is the most powerful thing we talked about, nurturing kindness, is she's not only become a better person, she's actually now volunteering in the community. She has stepped up to be a commissioner in training with one of our nonprofit organizations. So this is the cycle of nurturing kindness we were talking about. Is she went from somebody who didn't have a voice to now advocating that her voice matters, to empathizing and recognizing what's happening in her community, and then really stepping up to do something about it. This isn't a matter of 2 years.
That's so beautiful. And is it accurate to say that, I mean, hearing from your bio and knowing a little bit about your past, this is something that you probably would have needed as a young child, to not have to go through the confusing suffering and weaves of challenges that emerged in your life? And it's almost like planting these awareness and knowledge at a young age for these kids.
Absolutely. Secretly, it was what I wish I had, which is I wish I had a guidance. I wish I had a roadmap that I didn't have to spend so much time navigating, this explosion of information and overwhelming resources of not knowing where to go. I would have also, in addition to guidance, I would have loved to have an amazing team of people here who cared about me, right, to support my journey, and a diverse one. I like to think this whole concept of, Oprah Super Soul Sunday now for adults, I feel like all of us had Oprah Super Soul Sunday as our board of advisors for life, I think we would all do pretty swell. And I think that's part of it, is bringing that. And something I know One Heart does incredibly well is this community. And that's what these kids need. They need a tribe. They need communities to humanize their experience, to understand they're not going through alone, and then have a mutual aid network of partners all around them that are giving back, right? And coming together to be the resources they need for the vision that they have.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Look, the reason I wanted to touch more into all of what you're doing now is I see it as just such a beautiful and powerful example of following your path. Maybe it was somewhat influenced with your medicine work to find and be discerning of your contract of purpose. And if we kind of rewind back to these moments where you were in ceremonies, maybe within One Heart container, what would you say was the greatest gift that grandmother gifted you? Maybe it's a piece of wisdom. Maybe it's a visual. What would you say was the greatest gift that grandmother and this medicine has gifted you?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because grandmother is so loving, but also was knocking my head a couple of times in the ceremony. So I had this vision about how to solve for the challenges that I see from a societal perspective. And I had walked into the ceremony asking, like, okay, like, what do I do? And how do we solve for this? And then I had this very big head knocking experience. And like, why are you asking for guidance? Like, why are you seeking when you already know full well what the answer is? And then it took me right back to the moment when I was in spirit and inspired. I'm architecting, I'm seeing all these pieces of how everybody could come together, from nonprofit to for profit to public sector, right? So I would say that the biggest gift she has given me is to trust my inner wisdom. There's a saying now that ignorance is being stuck where we are enslaved, and knowledge is what makes us free. After the experience, I like to think that actually knowledge can sometimes enslave us too. Because what I see today in the society is that our need for data, for knowledge, this rationalism, is actually what's robbing us of our intuitive wisdom. So one of my major breakthroughs is to trust that inner wisdom and know how to notice it. But sometimes it doesn't require proof, and you don't get to think your way into doing. You do your way into thinking. I think it's the actual reverse.
That's beautiful, especially around trusting your inner wisdom. I'm curious, does any practices that someone who resonates with that can consider cultivating or practicing themselves? How do you maybe outside of medicine cultivate trusting that inner wisdom?
Immersing in volunteer work, or putting yourself in an environment where you are nurturing your kindness and compassion, because that's what courage is. Courage is where the heart triumphs over the mind's murmurings. So if we're not doing things, if we're not putting ourselves in a container where we're exercising the muscles of the heart, right, literally and figuratively speaking, then all we're doing is letting the mind be the authority in our heart. And we say, oh, I wish I had more courage. Well, what are we doing to really give it power? we're not giving it the space it needs to take the command that we truly want. So I would suggest probably thinking about volunteerism, giving back, just doing something that really allows our heart, to do what it's doing best, which is to love others, and ourselves. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exercising that kindness and compassion, maybe through volunteerism, like you mentioned, I think is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Can you share a major highlight from your One Heart experience that will be forever imprinted and has been forever imprinted in your heart?
I have so many. The ceremonies are profound. I have a experience that I will never forget there in terms of gifts, but I would say when it comes down to matters of practicality, it is the community of people and the lifelong friends that I have made through this journey, recognizing that there's a concept of soul family, and not only like-minded, but also like-hearted people who are on this path of service and surrender together. And that has definitely helped me recognize that, we're not alone.
Yeah, I always say to some people now that after the medicine ceremony, the community becomes the medicine. And I love the community that we get to cultivate, like you said, around soul family. I call it soul tribe. And I really see it as these courageous souls that have decided to really do the inner work to understand what can they be of service towards, and actually making that happen as, strong, high-performing creators and entrepreneurs. But it's just now tweaking that energy direction towards something of alignment, something of service, and like you said, sprinkling it with a lot of kindness, compassion, and of being love. So I love that. Thank you for reminding me that it's super beautiful. And I would love to ask you, what one piece of advice could you give those who have never experienced this medicine, this type of inner work, and even One Heart? Any advice that you can give to those listening?
I feel like I'm a broken record with this, but I would say anyone who has been made aware of plant medicine has developed just an inkling of curiosity to really follow that curiosity. If you have any doubt, nervousness, anxiety, that's all normal. Understand that exactly is what the mind is intended to do. Like, again, if we don't have a control, if it's ambiguous and there's not information, that sends us in a tizzy. But recognize that that's the mind. The curiosity comes from the heart, and that's the language of our soul. So if there is any curiosity, is give that your attention, give that your energy, give to your higher self by helping to remove the roadblocks, right? To seek for it. Why, and if somebody has any sort of urgency in their life, that this is the time to step in, because life is so short. We don't need to be living in a state of distress or anything less than positive emotion. And that is everything within our locus of control. And plant medicine has the ability to bring not only profound insights, but really powerful healing that is unexplainable, but that we deserve fundamentally, as our birthright.
I remember, and this helps me recall, when I shared with you around this experience, probably fall of 2018, a couple months before the journey, and just kind of shared with you, hey, I'm going to Costa Rica for the first time, going to sit with this group. Would you be interested? And you're like, give me some time. And I didn't hear from you for a couple of days. And then the next time I hear from you, you're like, I'm in. And I can only assume that there was that curiosity, maybe some sort of excitement and anxiousness all weaved in together that allowed you to feel excited and safe to take that leap.
Yeah. You know, I used to say, I think back when in early 2020, when we were thinking about, how to describe this and, a post-session debrief or integration time, I described the feeling before as this fear of the unknown as sort of falling, like not having anything. I think the metaphor I used back then was I'm letting go of a trapeze and I'm sort of like falling midair. This is now transformed to feeling like I'm flying.
Mm-hmm.
And I love this shift, and this is what the power of the medicine does. It truly widens the aperture of your mind to look at problems very differently. And the great thing about looking at problems differently is that it gives us more choices. It finds the third, the fourth, the fifth alternative. And we can afford all these different choices. And those choices then brings us so much more abundance and ease in our lives. And I think that's what plant medicine does for us. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, a very big shift in me.
Yeah. And like I've pointed in this episode, like I just see your path and commitment and devotion to Soul Seeded Journey as an ultimate integration of what you received from your own inner work, including the medicine, including your own shadow side of things. And I'm curious, what is your highest intention, largest moonshot vision with Soul Seeded Journey that you would like to vocalize and know that it is emerging, it is happening for you?
My highest intention and aspiration for this is that, Soul Seeded is not just a business or concept, that it becomes a way of life for everyone. And so from that is really a cultural movement where courage of allowing our hearts to lead the way in how we think and move in this world is fundamental. Like that's what's cool, right? Like that's what success looks like, that we can really rewrite and flip that script. I think that's the first thing. The second thing in terms of empowering this movement to occur is that well-being education, these very important things that we know are life wisdoms, that they become available to everyone everywhere. That something as important as a fundamental right to our experience of being alive as a human, to what unlocks our potential, that shouldn't just be accessible to the privileged and the wealthy. That should be for everybody to unlock that. So my hope is that this becomes accessible to every youth, everywhere, regardless of race, zip code. And through that process, if we have a Khan Academy for Wellbeing Education, but together, powered by local communities, right? People coming together in service of that education. Wow, what would that be? Instead of silos where academic and science, and we're all in what if we came together in an orchestrated fashion that our unity then starts to amplify and power, right? Using technology for scale. That's the biggest vision that I have.
That's so admirable. Thank you for holding that vision, and not only holding it, but also walking that path to continually create that. And my final question is, I think you and I both relate a lot with one another because we've consciously made a choice to step away from, let's say, the traditional path of an entrepreneur to kind of scale again and repeat the process and to try to sell another company, and really chose to be in a path of service, as I call yours, alignment and enlightenment, for your soul-seeded journey. What can you say for those who might be contemplating that, right? And maybe interested in stepping into that nonconformist, off the beaten path that isn't typical to hear And I would love to hear that, because I've taken that path, you've taken that path, and I personally believe what a beautiful world when more entrepreneurs, founders, creators who are so capable of creating move towards that more.
I think one of the most special things that we have that we've been gifted, that our gift is our uniqueness. And that uniqueness comes from our authenticity, right? So there's only one Tim Sae Koos in the world, and that's what makes you so special. And there's one of everybody. And so to walking this path is really about coming back to the core and understanding oneself very, very deeply and clearly, and asking, do you have that conviction to really step into your authentic power, or are you too afraid of your greatness? Where we just seek to emulate the life of others. So often we are trying to copy. I know from my first experience, I was trying to copy off someone's life exam, not recognizing mine had a whole different set of questions. And before doing that, I think this is an inward process. I wouldn't encourage it if our anchor isn't strong, if we're not deeply rooted like a tree, if our roots are not strong, and that root is authenticity and faith and trust, right? All these beautiful things. If we don't have that, then it would be very hard to grow the strong trunk, because there's too many things out here in this world. The entire system is set up to get us to conform. So I would think carefully, intentionally, and purposefully about this process, because it's not for the faint of heart. There is all those things, like we talked about, those 3 things that sets us into a tizzy, into a stress ball, and that's like this every day. So unless we can shift our perspective to know that that's not like falling, but that's flying, then it might be tough. But once that shift happens, oof, a lot of amazing, unexplainable, serendipitous things that happen. And then you're really in flow. And you don't need to spend like $15,000 on a class to figure out what it is, because you are it. Like, you are the flow.
Very much resonate with me. I mean, I think of it like, once you're in alignment and take that courageous leap of faith to what is unique for us, all the magical abundance, as I call it, starts to flow in all different facets, including relationships, our emotional inside, in our spiritual world. Everything starts to birth magic, which I'm sure we can go a lot deeper into, but I can just say I've seen that in you. I can fairly confidently say that that's happened for me as well. And yeah, I just think it's a beautiful message to share with those who are very capable of creating, and having their awakening moment to be able to step into this kind of path of service. To close, I thought I'd throw maybe something you wouldn't expect, but something I admire a lot about you. I clearly remember in our final ceremony, you shared a powerful prayer, and I can only assume your prayer has cultivated and blossomed in many different ways with your studies, with your teachers, and your own journey path. For myself, it's actually something I'm personally cultivating, because I believe there's an insane potency of prayer in not any sort of religious way, but really connecting to something greater, to be able to surrender. I see prayer as a practice of surrender for a greater power to guide and support us. And I just think how beautiful it is for other entrepreneurs or creators to understand it and receive that. So as a close, I would love to ask if you have a prayer that you'd like to just share for the world to receive, for those who are listening to just receive in their hearts. Maybe it's with the work that you do, for the kids that you support, or the mission that you serve. I'd love to invite you to share any prayer that comes to your heart.
I say this actually every day before every meal. In Mandarin, it's 供养佛、供养法、供养身、供养一切众生，愿断一切恶，愿修一切善，愿度一切众生. In the translation in English, really first is giving thanks and giving blessing. Giving blessing to all the higher powers above that which we don't see but trust that exist. That we give blessing to all sentient beings, humans and animals. And may we also remember to eliminate all that is evil, cultivate all that is good, and deliver to the needs of all sentient beings. So that's a prayer that I hold here, and remember that that's my existence, to always give thanks to everything, and know that as part of the oneness of this community of this Mother Earth, that my role here is to help my fellow family. Yeah.
Amen to that, and aho to that. Thank you, Tiffany, for such a beautiful conversation. I just admire the path you've taken, especially after exploring your inner world and receiving the clarity and discerning the path that you get to walk. You are the example of devotion towards something greater than ourselves, filled with so much compassion and kindness. So thank you for being that lighthouse for me, for this community, and for so many to receive your story. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you, Tim. It was such an honor and pleasure. Thank you.
We are very grateful to our guests for sharing their stories of transformation with One Heart, and we hope that their wisdom will support you in your life journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss out on our upcoming episodes. And are you a heart-centered leader or conscious creator who's ready to level up your life and impact in the world? Then we humbly invite you to apply to our next One Heart journey. One Heart was created to support leaders like you to live and lead from a place of true alignment, fulfillment, and joy. Our 8-week Human Life Accelerator is built around a 1-week journey to Costa Rica with sacred psychedelic plant medicine and a world-class experience that blends many ancient and modern modalities for growth and elevation. Before and after our 1-week journey, we support you with our curated preparation program and integration masterclasses that will help you land your breakthroughs in your day-to-day life for maximum and sustained transformation. Over 500 amazing leaders have joined One Heart on our journeys over the past 4 years. And if you would like to apply to join our next journey, head over to oneheart.com. That's the number 1, HEART.com. Sending you all my love, and remember to always choose love.